Today, it's all about which lenses that I recommend for the Sony FX6, as well as lenses that I'm keeping an eye out for in the future. So, with all that out of the way, let's get started. So when it comes to picking lenses for the FX6, what is right for you and your uses? If you find yourself filming narratives or films in general, your needs will be different than someone who's filming events, corporate interviews and things of that nature. So picking a lens greatly depends on the type of work that you do. And to really get started, I want to focus on the kit lens. So the FX6's 24-105 f4 kit lens is generally not a lens that I would recommend for the FX6. While it does feature a useful focal length, a low price, and internal lens stabilization, it doesn't really pair as well with the FX6 as the next lens I'll be mentioning. And if you pay attention to this channel, you'll know that I talk about this lens frequently, as it's great at filming pretty much everything. And the lens I'm referring to is the 28-135 f4 power zoom. Aside from the useful, broad coverage of the lens's focal length, it also features servo functionality and in-lens stabilization. If this power zoom didn't exist, I might not be as downbeat on the 24-105 kit lens, but I really like filming events with this, and between the broad focal length coverage and the servo capabilities, it's a breeze to work with. I should note this power zoom does feature a much higher price tag than the kit lens at $2,500. Although bear in mind, it is still half the price of the 16-35 t3.1 power zoom. And for my uses, the 20-135 power zoom is the ultimate lens for the FX6 for general use. For talking heads, sports, live events, commercials, you name it, this lens has you covered. As an aside, I'd also like to briefly discuss Firmware 2.0's improvements to the FX6, and more importantly, clear image zoom, and also how that affects lenses. You see, prior to Firmware 2.0, autofocus simply did not work with clear image zoom. You would simply be locked out of autofocus altogether and relegated to manual focus only. So why am I mentioning this right now? Well, as of Firmware 2.0, the camera does allow for autofocus with a clear image zoom punch-in, and it even includes touch tracking autofocus. So getting back to the power zoom, this 28-135 lens can now become basically a 42-202.5 millimeter lens along with touch tracking autofocus. You can get a similar, albeit shorter reach out of the 24-105 kit lens, but with no servo functionality, of course. Next up are the 35 and 50 millimeter G Master primes. The reason I recommend these lenses now versus before is both these lenses have very pronounced focus breathing. So what's changed, right? Well, the new focus breathing compensation on the FX6 for one. And that is all thanks to Firmware 2.0, which was released back in January. It should be noted, however, you will be looking at a 10% or so crop when using focus breathing compensation. I find these focal lengths to be extremely useful, and the image quality is sublime on these G Masters. However, G Master lenses are expensive, and if the G Master price tag doesn't work for you, there's always the 35 and 55 millimeter f1.8 lenses that I personally own. And while not as impressive on the image quality front, these lenses are lightweight and feature very little, if any, focus breathing, so you can use these lenses without focus breathing compensation, saving you that 10% or so crop. The next lens up is also G Master, and it is the 70-200 f2.8 Mark II. If you need focal length coverage in this 70-200 range, I would strongly recommend it. It's a conservatively sized and overall very lightweight package considering the focal length, and I would argue it's the best engineered 70-200 f2.8 I've ever used. Now up next are lenses on the horizon that I have not yet filmed with, but I'm pretty interested in just judging by the specs. So let's take a look at some of these lenses. First up is the 16-35 f4 power zoom, not to be confused with the 16-35 t3.1 I had mentioned earlier in the video. Admittedly, I'm a bit biased towards servo functionality, especially on the FX6, and an f4 like this lens is not a deal breaker to me. The specs impress me as it has a pretty low price for what it seems to offer. It's extremely portable, it's light in weight, and it has servo capability. Also, the lens barrel does not extend externally, which can be helpful for gimbal work. Now, one thing I would have liked to have seen in this power zoom is internal lens stabilization. Overall, this lens appears to be Sony's attempt at creating a solution for a wide-angle servo zoom on the FX6 that is portable, lightweight, and can offer some advantage for gimbal work as well. So it'll be interesting to see how this 16-35 f4 power zoom tests out in the field. Another lens that has yet to be released but definitely interests me is the 24-70 f2.8 Mark II. So the Mark II boasts a weight reduction of 21.5% coming from the 24-70 Mark I, with this new lens weighing in at 695 grams or about 1.5 pounds. And the only off-putting thing about this new 24-70 f2.8 is the price tag, with an MSRP of $2,300. However, if this focal length is useful to you and the lighter weight is appealing, I could see an argument to be made. I mean, add to that, even if there is, say, focus breathing on this 24-70 Mark II, it'll more than likely be curtailed given the FX6's focus breathing compensation feature. So overall, I'm curious to see what this new 24-70 is made of. And the final lens I want to discuss very briefly is not so much a singular lens as it is more of a lens lineup, and that is the Irix Cine line. I've been in the market for a while now looking for a Cine lens for the FX6, and I find the low price and image quality very encouraging on this Irix lens lineup. And I'm curious to hear your comments if you have maybe worked with Irix Cine lines in the past or if you own one. Feel free to leave your thoughts in the comments below. And as always, if you found this video helpful or insightful, give a big thumbs up, subscribe to the channel, comment below, let me know what you think, and I'll see you in the next one.